This is the New Jersey Lacrosse Podcast. Welcome back to 2026. I shouldn't say welcome back. Welcome in. Welcome into 2026, boys. And for those of you watching live on our YouTube channel, we are all actually physically in the same space, which we have never done before. This is a little bit risky.
Finally.
A little bit risky, putting Tharp and Gil in the same space together. Oh, my goodness gracious. In any event, boys, really excited to be back with you. We have a pretty exciting season planned for everybody. I think we're going to run things a little bit differently. I'm kind of taking over hosting duties from Gil a little bit just so we can kind of keep things moving. Our goal for all of you out there is to keep things about 30 minutes with every podcast. We're going to promise you one of these a week from now through the end of the Kirst Cup. So that's going to get us 16 episodes, and that's not really all you're going to get. Occasionally here and there, assuming we got some people that are interested in being on the podcast that we feel like are relevant, we're going to bring you an overtime podcast at some point during the week, hopefully interviewing some people who are relevant around the state, provide some insight into things that we really can't otherwise, and we really think there'll be some value added there because you can only hear us talk a little bit so much. We need to get some other varying voices. But as I welcome in my compadres for the season, Mr. Tharp, how are you doing, buddy?
Great, and I actually prefer the most irrelevant people. So if you think you might be the most irrelevant person in New Jersey Lacrosse, we want you on the podcast, actually.
You're already here.
Yeah, true. But this is a holiday to me. It goes Christmas, Thanksgiving, start of the Quadcast. So I'm so happy to be here. I love doing this with you guys. So
Fantastic.
Can't wait to fight.
Why he always assumes it's going to be a fight. Always assume. Mr. Terranova, how you doing, buddy?
I'm good. I'm pumped to be here finally in person. We've been talking about it for a couple of years now, so glad to. Thanks for hosting this in your in the man cave and get this going for the rest of the year.
Yeah, buddy. For first year as a collegiate official, a couple games into the season, how we doing?
Yeah, it moved fast for sure, but I'm excited to be part of that. I already got a couple games under my belt. I got a lot more on the way, and just constantly learning. And it's been a blast. Obviously, the level of play is even in the Division III landscape is through the roof right now. So it's really excited to be on the field for those games.
You are what I would say as to the players out there that are watching. I mean, I feel like a logical step is always like going to get. Yeah, just take it easy over there. Go. Whoa,
Do you guys need to switch seats?
I'm recruiting all the time because players out there, you guys go and you know your logical step is I'm going to go coach and do something at summer tournaments, and that's great. Stay involved in the game. Come officiate. Like, make your own schedule. There's a weekend you don't want to work, you don't work. The money is great. If you're good at it, like somebody over there who started 1 year in, you're a collegiate official in 12 months, okay? Like, and now the paychecks. Is the
Officials Association paying for this advertisement?
They should, actually.
It's actually Glock's
Great
Pickleball.
We are sponsored by My Pickleball and, all this other stuff. I wish we were sponsored by My Pickleball. And last but certainly not least, the founder of Q4 Lacrosse, Gilberto. How you doing, buddy?
Good, man. I'm good. Excited to be here. Excited to let you take over here. I'm most excited to talk about non-public bid.
Oh, my goodness.
PowerPoints and 8th graders posting their commitment posts to high school. Right, Darp?
So,
While you mention that.
for those of you who listened to the podcast in previous seasons, you will know that a majority of the season last year was spent with Tharp being very upset about the elimination of non-public B and the institution of PowerPoints. We will touch on PowerPoints a little bit, just as a little recap of how the season went last year in episode 1 here. But we've made a vow that we are not going to go down this circular route again, right, Tharp? We made that vow. We promised.
No, you promised. You promised. I am going to find a way every episode to mention non-public B, RIP.
Even non-public C now.
Yeah. I got to give a shout out to the Morris Catholic football coach. He, I guess there was a recent article. He tried to create non-public C as, and I just love it. Let's go through the whole alphabet. Anytime we can win the non-public Z state championship, you got to do it. So again, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I know you guys are trying to raise me up, but it's a little early, so I'm not too raised yet. So we'll get there though.
All right. So your immediate schedule for the podcast. We actually got together here. We are recording this on President's Day Monday, so we're a little bit ahead of when everybody's going to hear this stuff. And we're going to try to record 4 full episodes today here while we're hanging out together because, let's face it, boys, we can't really get in the same room all the time, and this is pretty fun. So we're going to do our 2025 season recap. You're going to get that in episode 1. Episode 2, we're going to give you a little bit of a rules preview of what you can expect, what's changed from the rules. If you're thinking something looks a little bit weird, it's probably because it does. And we'll go all through that. And also our thoughts on like kind of where the state of the game is in episode 2. And then we're really going to dig deep because, one of the things that we identified in the offseason is that the core of this podcast is really highlighting the young men that play this game in the state of New Jersey. So we're going to dig deep into our top 20. In episode 3, we're going to give you spots 11 through 20, and then we're going to count down spots 10 through 1 right as we kick off the season, and that's going to take us up to March 16th. And hopefully, if you're listening to this in the early pieces of this when this will come out March 2nd. I would love to be able to get John Sveck on the show for our overtime podcast for week 1, so put a little pressure on you, Coach, and I'll certainly be reaching out to try to make that happen. But for now, let's get into the season recap of 2025. Nova, take us through our state champions.
State championships, we had Glen Ridge, who was this Group 1 state championships. We had Manasquan, who was Group 2. We had Summit, Group 3. Westfield, Group 4. And Seton Hall was the non-public winner over Don Bosco there.
And of those teams, who stood out to you as a, kind of like, or was there a surprise? Was there a, hey, they were even better than we thought they were going to be. We knew they were going to be good. Where did your brain land on all that?
I think everyone agreed that Glen Ridge was definitely the biggest surprise of the year. And no one's bingo card would they have Glen Ridge winning the state championship. Their coach left to go be an assistant at Glen Ridge, at Del Barton. So there was a lot of, what ifs, a lot of, unknowns over there. And they go and they make a run in great fashion. Every game was super close. And so, they needed, some last minute heroics, on both sides of the ball. And their first state championship there in a while. So that was really, really impressive. Then Seton Hall getting over the hump. They never won a state non-public before. They won a Group 4 state championship back in 2004, but this is their first non-public. So to finally get over the hump for them was a pretty big deal. So I think those two definitely surprised me the most.
Tharpy, what about you?
Yeah, I think like you said, Glen Ridge coming out of the 5 seed, beating Mountain Lakes in an incredible final. Was arguably the most surprising. Manasquan, I think last year, kind of the stories like the teams that finally got over the hump, between Westfield, Manasquan, Seton Hall. It was a really impressive group of champions, and it led to a super competitive Kirst Cup. I don't think any games in the Kirst Cup were a blowout. I think Glen Ridge even, represented well in the tournament. So I think it was a really, really great showing for New Jersey Lacrosse. And, it'll be interesting how many of those guys repeat in 2026. Will be really fascinating to find out.
Now, obviously, we're touching here on the teams that won championships, but there were other teams, we know that, Nova, you had a chance to see Kingsway early in the season last year, and then you were kind of like the Captain Kingsway the rest of the season. There were teams like that we obviously expect now to kind of remain at a very high level, and that program chief among them. Lest anyone think that we don't do actual big boy journalism here. We use some in-person evaluation here. I know Gil's going to get out and try to see some teams this year. When you went out and saw Kingsway in the early part of the season last year, what led you to believe, whatever that was, March 15, March 20th, whenever you saw them, that you were like, okay, I know that this team is going to be there at the end?
Well, I think there's a lot of things that we've talked about on the pod in years past, especially in high school lacrosse. One, if you have a good goalie and you have a good face-off guy, you can find a lot of success in the game of lacrosse, especially in New Jersey high school lacrosse. And they didn't play necessarily the most rigorous team all year long that I saw them in their game, but they dominated on face-offs, and you looked like you could play the part. Then they already knew they had a great goalie in net. So those two things alone, and then I saw some pieces that they had, some young pieces. So again, not necessarily known entities, but now these guys are already committing Division I left and right. So they're just a loaded team. So I was just kind of right on the prediction there, and I kind of just knew based on also the schedule that they had that they were going to win a lot of games. Unfortunately, I know we'll talk about it a little bit more. Their schedule needs to amp up a little bit because when they ran to Westfield, they kind of got trounced. But they definitely were a team that were very worthy, and they had their big win over Shawnee, which I think was in many ways their ultimate Super Bowl when they had that win in the middle of the season.
Gil, for you, why was it important? I know we talked the other day about hey, should I be going out and seeing these teams? And I think the resounding response from all of us was yeah, get eyes on these teams. But as an evaluator of that kind of talent, what's so important about being able to see these kids in person as opposed to just looking at it on paper because we know maybe the talent level and the stuff you see in the summer?
Yeah, it's something for me personally. I mean, not being a coach right now and seeing as much lacrosse on field throughout the spring, where I'm a little bit more removed from it, where, seeing it on paper is one thing. You can see the stats, you can see the players who are doing well, see the scores, but that doesn't tell the whole story. I think for us as lacrosse people, being able to pass the eye test and go out and see how a team looks, even in practice, just see how their compete level is, see how they're coached, see how they play. I think we can tell a lot early in the season just to get to know the teams a little bit again, for me personally, to kind of reconnect with some teams and players and just kind of be more hands-on on the overall landscape.
Tharpe, you're in a day-to-day. I mean, what's it like? I mean, I think, we'd see, you see game days. Everybody sees game days. But, it's a grind out there with the players. Take us through the day-to-day a little bit.
Yeah, and I think, we're in a really unique spot, I think Rutgers Prep this year is doing things that they've never done before, especially. And I think you have to do it these days. You have to do it to keep up with everybody. For the first year ever, we're doing team training with this little startup company called Q4 Lacrosse.
Shameless plug. Shameless podcast.
We're doing, we did Jersey Strong for the first time. We did a fall tournament for the first time ever, and
NJ Fall Classic.
Yeah, NJ Fall Classic coming
Sponsored by Q4 Lacrosse.
Yep.
Just asking. I mean, I don't know.
And you have to we live in a world, right? And this is not becoming a non-public A and B thing, but we live in a world, especially in the non-public sector, right, where if you're not doing everything, you're doing nothing, and you're able to use that when, whether you like it or not, when a kid's looking at a school and they're coming to visit you and they say, hey, coach, what are you guys doing? Oh, well, we do team training in the off-season. We lift 4 days a week. We compete in off-season tournaments. That's what kids want to hear these days. And I think that, you're just setting yourself up for team success come the spring. But then B, you're also, doing a good job promoting your program and allowing yourself to get out there. Now we're on Q4's Instagram. We're making our presence known. But day to day, it's a grind because it's, you got to balance between the prom and this kid got in a fight with his girlfriend and this kid has a big AP test coming up. And so we're navigating all those different things while at the same time, knowing that, we think we could have a pretty good team this year. But, the one thing I'll say is I don't think we left any stone unturned in the off season. So I feel really good about that. Obviously, you never know though, and then, we opened our season with Somerville and Somerville kind of thumped us last year. So, we'll really know where we stand, post April 1st. But I feel good about where we're at. We're scrimmaging CBA this year, so that'll also tell us where we're at. But I feel good, and I say this, we laughed about it, but I do think, a lot of the landscape of the lacrosse world, it's going away from winter leagues and, this stuff in the winter to more of that team-focused training. And I think that, I'm not just saying this because he's sitting there, but, working with Gil's been great because, your kids are getting, good hands-on training. And I know there's a million different people out there who do the training aspect of it. But, if you're not doing that for your team, I think you're doing a disservice. So I think that's just the world we live in. And, it's hard, sending them to do a winter league pick a facility and, maybe a team dad or whoever is coaching them. So I think that's kind of the world we're heading. So that's a long-winded way to say get your team training through Q4.
Not at all where the question was.
In words that I never thought I would utter, let's keep it with you, Tharp, so you could speak more. In our 2025,
This is why we don't have time for guests, Keith.
Our 2025 season recap continues. Let's talk the PowerPoint system and how it went into being, to give everybody a little bit of background on just the process of the PowerPoints. PowerPoints were used, accrued during the season, and then there was a committee who seeded the state tournament where PowerPoints was a factor within the state tournament seedings, and the committee had the ability to seed the tournament the way that it saw fit. This is part of a 2-year implementation process from the NJSIAA to try to move exclusively to PowerPoints away from lax numbers. And your take, I loathe to say this, on...
Before you start, is anything, I know it's a 2-year period, is anything adjusted from last year to this year, or is it 2 years of the same exact situation and then look at adjustments?
I believe that nothing has changed from year 1 to year 2, and I don't know that there was a referendum or a mandate that we couldn't change anything. And you know what, maybe I should have figured this out, but I also think I would have heard it if there was a change to this point, that something maybe has changed in terms of that, but I don't know why it would, because there was definitely going to be a committee to seed the state tournament for the 2 years during the implementation process. So I don't know that you would even want to make a change there, because you want to give the committee as wide a berth as I think you would. But looking back at the PowerPoint system and how it worked for 2025, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the biggest issue with the PowerPoints, and this, we face this problem amongst ourselves of, we weren't exactly sure of how the information regarding PowerPoints was disseminated. I think there was some disagreement between coaches, and, Colleen and the NJSIAA had their opinion on how information was disseminated, and we have a relationship with Brandon Gould over at NJ.com, so we really conversed with him. So essentially, what the state ended up doing, and please correct me at any time, is basically what ended up happening was they used the PowerPoints. So the top 16 in PowerPoints qualified for the state playoffs, and then essentially they just went to lax numbers and seeded it like that. So that's essentially what happened. Now the minutia of it was, how do you accrue PowerPoints? There was a cutoff date for PowerPoints. You only accumulate PowerPoints for the first 12 games. Things like that kind of trickled out. And I think that the biggest complaint, the biggest argument would have been, and I don't know if this is the fault of the Coaches Association, I don't know if this is the fault of the NJSIAA. I don't think it was a very clear model of, it was, okay, we're doing PowerPoints, and that was it. And it wasn't very clear, and I don't know if, like I said, if the Coach Association needed to hold a seminar like you do for the officiating stuff. I don't know if the NJSIAA, because a lot of, what I think Colleen had mentioned to you was, well, we gave it to the ADs, right? And that was kind of my understanding. And I think
hold on, so I'll push back on that for a second, just to throw the thing out there. Was when we went back and looked at it, if you remember, the message did go out from Nick Maselli from the Coaches Association on whatever it was, November something. But then the question was, well, who got that from the Coaches Association? Did that get disseminated? I don't know that you can micromanage and say, like, all right, to me that just says everybody's internal process has to get better. If somebody gets a message from like the powers that be disseminated to all the people it should be, the fact that somebody's assistant coach or somebody's head coach didn't get it, like that's an institutional level failure, not necessarily an NJSIAA failure.
No. But I guess my point is, like, I wonder, like, how do we clear up that process?
Make sure that the internal processes at every school are better. I mean, that's like did we, coach talking to AD, coach talking to assistant coaches, did we get anything? Or just knowing who your people are.
There were some problems, though, with, I think, the information sport to sport, because I remember we were texting Brandon at some point saying, this is an update, was it 12 games, was it 13 games, whatever, and then there's different sports that either weren't listed properly on the sheet that went to everybody, or it was confusing in some way where even coaches, even Brandon didn't know. He was like, oh, let me double check that. I think whatever sport it was 14, lacrosse was 12 or whatever, and I think there was confusion. To me, if there's confusion with a guy like Brandon who's literally in the system of the PowerPoint, like he's on NJ.com, he has access to all that, and he even has to go double check something about a specific sport, then how would a head coach at whatever school know for scheduling? Like, you were worked up about something that was like, I forget the details, but it was like after 12 games, or it was 12 your last 12 games versus first 12 games or something like that.
It was because
isn't it like your 12 highest?
No, but what's it called when your residual points? Because we ended up beating Watchung Hills, and they, at the point, they were like 9-7 or something. But after 12 games, they were only like 6-6. So we missed out on 3 wins of residual points. And it was because their record, you only get residual points up through their first 12 games. So that's why, we were talking about teams who got screwed over. I remember the one was Wayne Valley. They ended up beating DePaul twice, and DePaul was like 12-0, or they ended the season like 16-5 or something like that. But they missed out on like those 4 extra wins, and they ended up missing the state tournament by 1 game. But to your point, Keith, to go back, it came down to there was 2 main problems, I think, with the PowerPoints. The biggest one, which we're not going to be able to solve, and we're frustrated about it, but we've kind of dropped the sword a little bit, is there's no more good losses. You get no credit for a loss. So, if a team schedule, normally in years past, if you schedule Del Barton and you lose to them, take Chatham, for example. Chatham lost to Del Barton by 1. Normally that's a great loss. You get positive PowerPoints on lax numbers. On PowerPoints, you get nothing. You just get the base number of Del Barton wins. And then the second thing that again is not going to change is the out-of-state results, and that really pertains to the non-public schools, because where all this is heading is apparently it sounds like next year. So we're still good for this year, but next year they're not going to be able to use lax numbers. That
is my understanding.
So the problem becomes, especially for these out-of-state teams, where Del Barton, Seton Hall, basically all the big hitters in non-public, right, play close to 40% of their games are out of state.
Yeah, like literally, they have to have 60 in-state to be part of the playoffs. So like literally, they get to their 60%, and the rest are out of state.
And now, for example, like last year, there was a point in the year where some teams that there was one point kind of late towards the cutoff, like Don Bosco was like the 8 seed. Because they played a lot of out of state, and they lose them, which is fine, right? Because they're playing Fairfield Prep, they're playing Del Barton plays.
Sure.
Del Barton's schedule is crazy this year. They're playing Culver, so it's going to be interesting as we move. And then this year and last year you could always default to, okay, we can lean on lax numbers, but it's going to be interesting because next year when you can't lean back on lax numbers, who's going to be that voice in the rooms, the voice of reason that says, okay, we're not just going to go off of, we're not going to go off just straight PowerPoints because we know there's some nuance there. Whereas, the eye test clearly says in a given year, Del Barton, pick a school, right? Seton Hall should have been number 1, but they're number 7 on PowerPoints because, like we said, they played 40% of their games out of state.
Right.
So that's really the 2 main issues. Again, I think the information issue is clearly solved this year because we lived through it year 1. Now there's still going to be issues with strength of schedule. That's not going to go away because, like I said, there's been no changes to reward a good loss. And then last year, there was a handful of teams, Randolph, North Hunterdon, Wayne Valley, that according to lax numbers should have been in the tournament. Didn't end up making the tournament, so it'll be interesting to see if we run into that issue again this year.
And I'm hopeful. That's one of the things that I do think, we identified a couple of those things. One being exactly what you just said, and then the other one being what you touched on was, the residual PowerPoints and why are we only counting it through 12 games. There were some informational things that Brandon Gould and I went through to see what was the average number of games that teams played leading up to the state cutoff deadline for the seeding meeting, and that number was 14 and not 12. So I don't know that you're going to make, I know you're never going to make everybody happy, but could that be a very easy tweak to just say, hey, we decided it's and it was not the average, it was the mode. For you math majors out there, it was the most frequent number of games played by the deadline was 14. So that to me said that's the number that we should use. That feels like a very easy fix. How we then go about fixing, the other piece of this regarding rewarding quote unquote good losses is something that I think everybody's interested in. And obviously I don't have any quantitative data that says, yes, 68% of the people think this is a good idea. I think everybody is generally in favor of doing it right. It's just figuring out how to do it right. And can we build some kind of API, on the back end with NJ.com and, because there's, I know the fear is that we're when Lax Power went out of business, that was a very scary thing because we didn't have a process in place to do this, and there would be nothing, even though there's no evidence to say that Lax numbers would go out of business. Somebody might decide they want to sell, and so what the NJSIA is thinking is rational, and it's just the question becomes how do we do it, and it's just not easy. Now that said, that was, look at you, Tharp. That was a good recap on the PowerPoints. Good job.
I do think, and this is a bigger topic, and I do think our...
See the countdown clock there.
No.
I still got to get to Gil here before we get out of time.
I'm going to be short. I do think, and because we have 3 more
Story
episodes.
of your life, bro.
We have 3 more episodes to film. We have, I think our sport is put in the wrong bucket in the eyes of the NJSIAA. Because like you had mentioned.
Nope, stopping it. I'm stopping it right now. We're not doing it. This is going to go too long.
That's definitely going longer than 5 minutes.
We're definitely going longer than 5 minutes. Yeah,
Coming on episode 2. Coming on episode 2.
Coming on
No,
the
don't speak for it.
overtime episode of this week, just Keith and Bill one-on-one.
Nope, absolutely not.
Playing Golden Tee together.
I will not do it. Last time I played Golden Tee with my nephew, he almost ruptured a ligament in his thumb, like all of us.
I got some hot takes coming, people. Don't worry.
That's terrible. All right, Gil Martell. The Kirst Cup. Another year with the Kirst Cup. From what I understand, Kirst Cup's still going to exist here as we go. Seton Hall Prep wins the Kirst Cup.
Yep.
Take us through how that all went down. Your view on how everything went.
Yeah, I think last year was a pivotal year for the committee, at least in terms of planning, getting through the dates pushed back on the regular season and the state playoffs going a little bit further into June. I know that's something we talked about internally a lot, getting into the club season and graduations, and it was getting extremely late in the year to try to fit the Kirst Cup in because the state playoffs, the state championships were essentially when the Kirst Cup final or the TOC final would have been in previous years. So this was definitely a pivotal year. The committee feels that getting it done this past year sets the stage for future years to prove that it was done, it can be done. I think there was definitely some concern earlier in that planning process that it might not be possible, but I think the committee did a good job in terms of gathering information from schools, ADs, coaches on graduation dates, team banquets, things like that to be able to fit that in and work with every team involved. So, for the sake of New Jersey lacrosse and getting down to one championship or one champion like all the coaches want to see, it was great, I think, but I do think it loses some of its luster, as we've talked about, compared to the TOC. It's hard to replace. I think, again, the people in charge of it and putting their time into it have done a phenomenal job in making it go. I think you just lose some of the college coaches on site, some of the fans on site, I think, and that's partly just the timing of it all. Again, it's so late into June now, out of the Kirst Cup committee's hands based on when the state pushed the season back to. So trying to get it done, I think, again, this past year, getting it in place and having it run sets the stage for future years given the same timeline. So everything's on schedule for Kane University again this year. Everything is already in the works, similar to it was last year. I think now it just becomes how do we grow the Kirst Cup back into what the lure of the TOC was, and kind of bringing back that magic of the environment, the fans, the college coaches, the competitiveness. I think the games have been great, as we talked about, getting the teams out.
No doubt about it.
But I think it definitely not having a what's the word? From just
the same allure.
Yeah.
It just didn't. The crowds weren't there. It's not to
anybody's fault. I don't think
No.
it's just the way it is right now, and I think it's just going to be a battle to how do you fit that in. I think weekday games now, obviously getting away from club season on the weekends. That's where everything's gone. I think going back to scheduling this year, I think was better in terms of, and something we talked about year one of doing like a Monday, Tuesday, Thursday type situation. I think year one it was a Saturday championship game, and that made it really hard on some people, right? I know you had a lot of club conflicts with that. And it's tough on kids because they got to make the decision now. Right. They're in the amount of stress we see of especially sophomores, juniors right now, like in the recruiting process. They want to go play in the Kirst Cup final if they can, or the semifinals, whatever it is. But when they're getting pressure to go to this elite club tournament because that's where they're going to get seen and recruited, that's a huge day for them. So how do they make that decision? I think overall, just the process and the dates is making it really hard on everybody, from the planners of the Kirst Cup to the coaches trying to make it all work, parents, players. all the way down the line. So it's definitely been a challenge. I think, again, the people who are working on it are doing a great job. I think now it's just how do we kind of bolster it back up to what it was, before it was the Kirst Cup.
If only you knew somebody that was sat on the committee to make this whole thing happen.
If only.
That's it. All right. This has been episode 1 of the 2026 New Jersey Lacrosse Podcast. Stay with us for the entirety of the rest of the season, all 16-plus episodes that we have coming to you from now through the middle of June, as we give you everything that you need to know, and probably a whole bunch of stuff you didn't even know you needed to know about New Jersey high school lacrosse. For Bill Tharp and Anthony Terranova and my man Gil Swenson, the founder.
You just forgot his name.
No. I'm trying to. Good Lord, way to step on the whole thing.
You forgot his name. That's crazy.
I was going to give you a nice staccato reference of Gil Swenson, Q4 Lacrosse. I was going to give
I forgot his name. That's so embarrassing. Gil Swenson, Q4 Lacrosse.
If only Bill would let me actually host the podcast, that would be fantastic. All right, so I'm going to pick up right where I left off. And my man, Gil Swenson, the founder of Q4 Lacrosse. For all of us, we'll see you next week here on the New Jersey Lacrosse Podcast.